We met battling. That's how we met. We was in the Bronx in the pool hall. After that battle, he went to like a show. He got on stage, Jay-Z, where you at?
Before Rock Nation champagne deals and billionaire boardrooms, Jay-Z had a serious problem. That problem was named DMX, a Yonkers street soldier who didn't just rap, he poured out his soul like a weapon. In the late 90s, backstage at a Def Jam event in Manhattan, the tension between the two nearly turned violent. Years later, 50 Cent even said Jay was lucky DMX didn't shoot him that night. This wasn't just about music. This was street code, betrayal, and power colliding. What went down stayed buried for years until now. Before the platinum plaques, before the boardrooms and brand deals, there was the Bronx. Inside a dim, unventilated studio plastered with bootleg Redmond posters and reel tapes stacked in the corners, two of New York's rising MCs faced off for the very first time. The year was 1994. The streets were cold, crack still ruled the corners, and hip-hop was shifting from raw cypher battles into big business.
Boom, boom. When that said, Jay wasn't lying. Everybody that was on that tour at that point in time was like, we could just pack our and go.
Sean Carter, Jay-Z, had already been making moves, hustling in Marcy projects and dropping verses on Jazzo's tracks. Known for his lightning-fast delivery and cool confidence, he stepped into that room ready to claim his spot in the underground. This was before Reasonable Doubt, before Jay-Z was a mogul, just a hungry rapper with bars, ambition, and a heavy chip on his shoulder. DMX, real name Earl Simmons, came down from Yonkers shirtless, sweating, still catching his breath like he had just run straight off the block. He didn't bring industry connections or polish. What he brought was scars, raw pain, and a battered notebook filled with rage. At the time, X had only just started buzzing on DJ Clue's mixtapes and occasionally popping up on Stretch and Bobbito's legendary 899 KCR radio show, the place where unsigned lyricists went to war. He wasn't signed, he wasn't polished, he was just flat out dangerous.
No. Dripping sweat. They going crazy. In between songs, he can't even hear what he's saying because they screaming.
People who were there, and producers, interns, even security, swear the room froze the second the cypher started. Jay-Z stepped up first, cool and calculated, firing off his multisyllabic rhymes with surgical precision. But when DMX came forward, everything shifted. He growled, he barked, he stalked the mic like an animal unleashed. He didn't just rap, he turned that studio into a cage match. Every bar came with fangs, every verse felt like a threat. X attacked the rap. Anxious, wild, Uncle Murda later said. The battle was never officially released. No tape, no clean footage. But the story spread across the streets like wildfire. Some said DMX edged it. Some said Jay didn't back down, but he definitely felt the heat. And even though they dapped each other up afterward, the tension between them never really disappeared. It wasn't just a battle. It was the spark of a rivalry built on deep suspicion. To DMX, Jay-Z represented everything fake about industry politics. Cold detachment, no loyalty, not being real. And that cut him deep. That dude ain't giving me no love when I was down. I don't forget that, DMX would say years later in a Rough Riders documentary. Jay, on the other hand, never dissed X publicly, but insiders claim he saw something in DMX's eyes that night. Something dark, unshaken, and unpredictable. That Bronx studio clash became one of the last true underground rap battles before both men were catapulted into superstardom. But don't get it twisted. The night didn't end in peace. It was just the opening round in what became a long, silent war. By '98, the underground was behind them. Both Jay-Z and DMX had blown up into rap titans, each carving their own lane in a game that was quickly becoming corporate. Jay-Z dropped Volume 2, Hard Knock Life, a monster album that went 5 times platinum and catapulted him into the mainstream with tracks like Can I Get A and the now iconic title track flipping that Annie sample. Jay wasn't just rapping anymore. He was stepping into boardrooms, rubbing elbows with CEOs, and talking ownership before it was even cool.
We met battling. That's how we met. We was in the Bronx in the pool hall. After that battle, he went to like a show. He got on stage, Jay-Z, where you at?
Meanwhile, DMX came in like a bomb, raw, unfiltered, unstoppable. In May, he delivered It's Dark and Hell is Hot, a blood-soaked, gritty project that spoke straight to the streets. And just 7 months later, he came back swinging with Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. 2 #1 albums in the same year. DMX did the unthinkable. Both multi-platinum, both straight out the gutter, fueled by darkness, pain, and raw spiritual energy. He wasn't just hot, he was untouchable. The people crowned him their champion, and he didn't need boardrooms, brand strategies, or tailored suits to get there. But behind all that success, the tension kept boiling. On paper, Jay-Z and DMX were label mates at Def Jam. In reality, they couldn't have been more different. Jay moved like a chess master, studying the game, calculating every move, running business plays with ice-cold precision. DMX, he was the opposite. Explosive, emotional, raw to the bone, and he didn't trust corporate politics. Most of all, he didn't trust Jay-Z. That distrust spilled over when the Hard Knock Life tour kicked off in late 1998. It was supposed to be a victory lap for hip-hop. Jay headlining with a stacked lineup. Method Man, Redman, Beanie Siegel, and of course, DMX. On stage, they created history, delivering some of the most iconic performances of the late 90s. But backstage, it was frostbite cold. DMX barely said a word to Jay. Crew members whispered that X watched everyone like a hawk, especially Jay. He didn't vibe with the atmosphere. To X, the tour wasn't family. It was war games. And Jay was the one moving all the pieces. Meanwhile, Jay was already plotting his climb into executive power. With Dame Dash and Kareem Biggs Burke at his side, he was turning Roc-A-Fella into more than just a label. It was a brand, an empire in the making. And behind the scenes at Def Jam, the execs were watching closely. To them, Jay looked like the future. Polished, professional, a man who could flip from street corner slang to corporate boardroom talk without breaking a sweat. DMX saw it coming, and it shook him. When Def Jam started whispering about changes in leadership, the word was that the label wanted a new president. And behind closed doors, Lear Cohen and Kevin Liles were already throwing their weight behind Jay-Z.
I was actually forced to be an artist and a businessman because when I tried to get a deal, I couldn't get a deal, so I had to create Rockefeller Records. We actually created Rockefeller Records from nothing.
Rockefeller wasn't just hot, it was proving to be a machine. Successful, consistent, and built to last. So when Def Jam handed Jay-Z more control over the label's future, DMX took it as pure disrespect. To him, Jay wasn't just rising up. He was being positioned as his boss, and that was something X could never accept. DMX didn't believe Jay had earned his stripes in the same trenches he had. Not the same scars, not the same sacrifices. He looked at Jay's climb as a direct threat, not just to his career, but to the authenticity of hip-hop itself. To DMX, Jay started to look less like a rapper and more like the very corporate machine he'd been fighting against his whole life. What began as mutual respect had now twisted into something darker. Paranoia, silence, quiet resentment. And when Jay-Z officially accepted the presidency of Def Jam in the early 2000s, it didn't feel like business to DMX. It felt personal, a betrayal stamped in ink. For him, it confirmed everything he feared about Jay. From that moment on, there was no turning back. By early 2002, the Cold War between Jay-Z and DMX finally hit a breaking point. What started out as lyrical competition had turned into something darker. Territorial, political, and deeply personal. Jay-Z wasn't just another rapper anymore. He was the newly crowned president of Def Jam, the most powerful seat in East Coast hip-hop. He now held the keys to the same building where he and DMX once fought for scraps. And that's when it all went left. Behind closed doors at Def Jam's Manhattan headquarters, some say on the 8th floor in the executive boardroom, Jay made a call that crossed the line. According to people close to DMX, Jay deliberately pushed back the release of X's next album. The official excuse? Bad timing, the market's too crowded. From a businessman's angle, it was cold strategy. But to DMX, it was straight up betrayal.
You know, I go to do the 6th album, and you know,
Jay-Z became president.
Yeah. When he first got the job, he hit me with the call like, yo, dog, MH is running the building, like, yo, you good? Finish the album, shoot the video. What happened? Niggas go on vacation.
X remembered when Def Jam was drowning in the late 90s, and it was his records that kept the label alive. It's dark and hell is hot, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, and then there was X, all #1 debuts, all carved out of his pain. Now the same label he carried on his back was putting him on pause, and worse, it was Jay-Z pulling the strings. That night, something snapped. According to insiders, DMX stormed into Def Jam's offices shirtless, drenched in sweat, and clearly wired. Security couldn't stop him. He pushed past and made a beeline for the executive wing. He wasn't there for handshakes or a calm discussion. He was there to face Jay-Z, man to man, ready for confrontation. To DMX, Jay-Z was no longer just competition. He was both a traitor and an oppressor. Jay was already in the room that day, seated with label execs, assistants, and a couple of Rockefeller loyalists by his side. What happened next has lived in whispers ever since. DMX stormed into the meeting and the whole atmosphere collapsed. He locked eyes on Jay, pointed straight at him, his voice shaking, not from fear, but from rage. "You think you my boss? I made this label hot." Jay didn't stand up. He didn't yell back. Witnesses say he didn't even blink. But the silence that followed was heavy enough to choke the room. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. For a split second, no one knew if this was about to turn into an argument or an all-out explosion. Some swear DMX reached under his waistband like he was ready to pull something. Others say he didn't have to. His eyes alone carried the threat. That 1,000-yard stare, the kind you only see in someone who's lived through real battles, the kind of look that told you he wasn't bluffing. One Def Jam staffer later admitted security was seconds away from tackling him. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was Jay's stone-cold calm. Maybe it was the crowded room full of witnesses. Or maybe X just wanted to make a statement, not a casualty. Whatever the truth, Jay-Z never spoke on it publicly. But insiders say he walked out of that room a changed man. Alive, untouched, but different. From that day on, Jay kept it professional whenever X's name surfaced. But behind the scenes, there was always tension. A pause, a calculation, a quiet understanding that things had come this close to crossing the line. That day at Def Jam wasn't just an argument, it was a warning. By the early 2000s, the world began to see the truth. DMX wasn't just rapping about the struggle, he was the struggle. Every growl, every scream of pain, every bark on a record wasn't an act. It was Earl Simmons, raw and unfiltered, living out chaos in real time. He didn't put on a persona for hip-hop. He was hip-hop's most tortured reality. From 1991 to 2013, DMX was arrested more than 30 times. Not a rumor, not exaggeration, but fact. Over 30 arrests across multiple states, spanning weapons charges, thefts, impersonations, and violent outbursts. His life wasn't just a rap career. It was a rap sheet, soaked in gasoline and set on fire. In 1998, just months after It's Dark and Hell Is Hot went platinum, DMX was busted in New Jersey for carrying an unlicensed firearm. The industry was stunned. The man who just saved Def Jam was already tangled up with the law, and the wolves started circling. By 2000, the headlines got uglier. DMX was arrested in Buffalo, accused of carjacking after flipping out in a disagreement and allegedly taking off in someone else's vehicle at gunpoint. No entourage, no bodyguards, just X. Angry, reckless, unpredictable. And then came 2004, one of the wildest chapters of all. At JFK Airport in New York City, DMX was arrested for impersonating an FBI agent. Authorities say he flashed a fake badge, barked federal commands, and tried to jack a car right in the middle of the terminal. When law enforcement finally pulled him over, they found crack and a firearm sitting right inside the SUV he was driving. By 2007, things got even darker. Animal cruelty charges hit the headlines after authorities raided his Arizona property. What they discovered was shocking. Dozens of pit bulls, many malnourished, some already dead, others chained up without food or water. DMX claimed he hadn't been home in months, but the court didn't buy it. From there, the arrests kept stacking. Drug possession, parole violations, failure to pay child support, driving without a license, assaulting officers, bail jumping. The cycle never stopped. Sometimes he did a few days, sometimes months, but one thing stayed the same. DMX never ran from trouble, and he never tried to hide who he was. It became a tragic pattern. For every hit single, there was another mugshot. For every sold-out tour, there was a warrant waiting. For every verse about God, pain, and demons, there was a courtroom appearance with X looking worn down, bitter, and alone. But for those who came from the streets, and especially for someone like Jay-Z, this wasn't just another rapper spiraling. This was a man with no fear. DMX didn't care about the rules, he didn't care about industry politics, and he definitely didn't care about consequences. In a 2009 jailhouse interview, when asked if he feared death, he said flat out, "I ain't scared to death, man. I done seen worse than hell." And Jay-Z knew it. Everybody did. That's why even when the two fired subliminal shots, Jay with slick metaphors, DMX with growls and direct call-outs, it never went further. There was always a line neither Jay-Z nor DMX dared to cross. Not out of brotherhood, but because Jay understood what it meant to go to war with a man who had nothing left to lose. DMX had stared into the abyss and barked right back at it. In corporate rooms, that made him unpredictable. In studios, he was lightning. In real life, he was dangerous. Not the fake kind of dangerous rappers bragged about in their bars, but the kind that came from a wounded, cornered animal. The kind that would bite whether you flinched or not. And no matter how rich, how powerful Jay-Z became, he never underestimated that truth. By 2003, the balance of power had flipped completely. On one side stood Jay-Z, climbing higher and higher, not just in music, but in business and culture. He wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was a mogul in the making, sitting courtside with CEOs, dropping hit after hit, carefully shaping the image of a polished, strategic powerhouse. His romance with Beyoncé only amplified it, giving him a glow no other rapper could match. But in the other corner was DMX, still raw, still howling through the mic, still carrying that street fire, yet weighed down by addiction, endless arrests, and a music industry that seemed to be slowly shutting its doors on him. What made it worse was DMX believed the doors weren't just closing, they were being slammed shut from the inside. And in his mind, Jay-Z was the one holding the keys. From 2003 to 2006, X watched as Def Jam, the label he once carried on his back, slowly turned its focus away from him. This wasn't paranoia. The signs were real. As president of Def Jam, Jay-Z had the final say, approving budgets, greenlighting projects, and deciding which artists got the marketing push. And during that reign, DMX saw his worst fears come true. The label poured heavy money and muscle into fresh faces. Rihanna, Ne-Yo, Young Jeezy, all polished, brand-friendly, and tailor-made for crossover success. Meanwhile, DMX's projects collected dust. His sessions sat idle, buried under shifting agendas and cold industry politics. By 2006, the breaking point hit. DMX released his 6th studio album, Year of the Dog, again. But instead of a comeback moment, it felt like a setup. Not because the music lacked heart, X still ripped his soul open on every track, but because the label gave it nothing. No real promotion, no radio push, no magazine rollout, no tour support. To him, it was deliberate. He didn't just feel overlooked, he felt erased, silenced, replaced. Industry whispers later confirmed it. Collabs that featured DMX were quietly shelved, offers were blocked, and his name stopped coming up in executive meetings. Even DJs who once blasted his records suddenly went quiet. Why? Because by then, DMX wasn't seen as an investment. He was too wild, too risky. And under Jay-Z's leadership, Def Jam was moving into a new era, sleek, corporate, and built for mainstream expansion. There was no room for a ticking time bomb in Def Jam's new polished image. So DMX made his move, he walked away and went independent. It was bold, it was defiant, but it came with a cost. No more big budgets, no more marketing muscle, no more label machine protecting him. Instead, he found himself recording with smaller outfits, hustling shows overseas, dropping projects with little distribution power. And through it all, the anger never faded. It grew. To DMX, it wasn't just business betrayal, it was personal. In his eyes, he and Jay had started from the same streets, two wolves in a game full of sheep. They battled, they bled, they rose together. But when Jay got the throne, he didn't extend a hand. He offered silence, and X never forgave that. The 2010s brought an eerie calm between the two giants. On the surface, Jay-Z had transformed into a global mogul, Rock Nation expanding into a media empire, stakes in tech companies, billion-dollar brand deals. By 2010, Jay wasn't just a rapper anymore. He was the blueprint. Albums like Watch the Throne and 444 proved he had transcended hip-hop's corner battles and planted himself deep inside the boardroom. Meanwhile, DMX was fighting a different war for his life, his soul, his sanity, addiction, prison time, trauma. It all weighed on him. He wasn't the unstoppable chart monster of the late 90s anymore, but he wasn't gone either. His voice, his pain, his legend still lingered, and even through the silence, there were cracks of light. In 2012, whispers began to spread. Rock Nation had quietly reached out about a DMX comeback. Not a standard record deal, but something more respectful. Legacy management, a seat at the table as a veteran, not just a fading act. The plan was simple: relaunch DMX, clean up the chaos, back him with a tour, maybe even drop a comeback album. But the deal never happened. Some say X didn't trust the very hands offering him help. Others say he refused to let anyone control his moves, especially Jay-Z. For DMX, it was never about contracts, streaming platforms, or industry strategies. It was always about truth, loyalty, and authenticity. and the industry, as always, had other plans. Even so, flashes of DMX's greatness kept breaking through. One of the most unforgettable moments came in 2020, during the pandemic, when he stepped into the Versus Arena against Snoop Dogg. Broadcast live to millions, it was the first time in years fans saw the old X shine through. He wasn't slurring, he wasn't erratic, he was present, he was alive, he laughed, he smiled, he spit classics with tears in his eyes. It was a rare glimpse of the man he could have been if the demons had ever loosened their grip. And behind the scenes, even Jay-Z was watching. Years later, Jay opened up in an interview about his complicated history with X. His tone wasn't cold or businesslike. It carried weight. It carried guilt. X brought out something in me that nobody else did, Jay admitted. I respected him, I just couldn't control him. That single line said it all, because control was never what DMX wanted. Not from the streets, not from the system, not from the industry, and especially not from a former rival turned record executive. What DMX wanted was simple: realness. Love without contracts, loyalty without fine print, protection without a price tag. But in an industry built on smoke and mirrors, realness was the rarest currency of all. As the years slipped by, the chance for reconciliation faded into silence. There were no headline-making hugs, no Rock Nation contract, no glossy photo op. What lingered instead was something heavier: mutual regret. DMX for never trusting enough, Jay-Z for stepping in too late. And even though they stood on opposite ends of the music empire, one in million-dollar suits, the other clawing his way back towards stage lights, their names stayed forever linked, not just by beef, but by brotherhood, by scars, by the kind of war wounds that never really heal. In the early morning of April 2nd, 2021, sirens cut through the silence of White Plains, New York. Emergency teams rushed to a private residence where Earl Simmons, DMX, had collapsed from a massive heart attack triggered by a drug overdose. By the time he reached the hospital, his brain had already been starved of oxygen. For a week, machines kept him alive, but X never opened his eyes again. Fans across the world prayed, mourned, and filled timelines with tributes. Outside the hospital, crowds gathered with candles and chants, hoping for a miracle. But on April 9th, 2021, at just 50 years old, DMX was pronounced dead. The world mourned loudly. Jay-Z mourned quietly. No public statements, no tribute verses. Instead, whispers later revealed that Jay-Z and Beyoncé quietly purchased DMX's master recordings just to give them back to his children. A private move, an act of respect that spoke louder than any press release. Because DMX was never just a rapper. He was a storm, unpredictable, violent, spiritual, unstoppable, a force of nature too big to measure. 50 Cent once said it best: X was the realest to ever do it. Jay was lucky he made it out that room. When DMX passed, the void he left wasn't just in music, it was in the culture itself. No spotlight, no platinum plaque, no sold-out arena could ever fill it. Jay-Z never dissed DMX again, never threw another slick line, never tried to rewrite what happened, because some energies are too real to touch. That night in 2002, when DMX stormed Def Jam shirtless, sweating, ready for war, Jay didn't just see a rival, he saw a warning. A man with nothing to lose, a soul built from pain, loyalty, and battle scars. And from that day on, Jay chose silence, because some stories don't need spin. Some legends don't fade. They echo forever. And DMX was one of them. So now I'll leave it to you. What do you think about the rivalry, the respect, and the scars that linked Jay-Z and DMX forever? Was this hip-hop's most dangerous standoff? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, sound off below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you want more deep dives like this.